And good morning, everybody. Welcome to Marshall County Today, the new talk show aimed at informing you about stories, people, and businesses around your neighborhood. Well, today our guest is County Councilman Jesse Bohannon, getting a chance to finally hit the airwaves. And long time no see, man.
Yeah, it's good to be back with you, Tony. Always love being on Max and getting to talk to the people of Marshall County. So thanks for having me back.
Now, if you're wondering, for those of you who are watching on our Max 98.3 stream right now live, you see dollar bills on there. That has nothing to do with Jesse. That has to do with Mark and me losing bets to Mark, and he wants to hang it over my head.
All right.
So that's it. So there's nothing else other than that. So don't start jimming up stuff.
Although I am taking campaign contributions. So.
Man, I can't help you there. I'm sorry, man. I just can't. Well, welcome to the show. Lots to get to here. Matter of fact, I don't know if we're going to get to everything we're going to want to kind of talk about here. But this week, though, a pretty big thing that you guys got to do as a council. It's budget time.
Right. Yeah, that is the number one responsibility for the council. We are the fiscal body for Marshall County, and we've got probably about a $35 million budget this year, maybe a little bit more. And second reading is this week. We're going to have a Budget and Finance Committee meeting this morning at 10 o'clock over the county building and just kind of go through getting our housekeeping in order before we go into that second reading hearing. And if anybody's been to one of those or watched one of them online, that's the one that tends to be many hours long. We've got a 100-page budget, and there's, probably 1,500 lines in that budget. And so we're going to set a target today about what we want to try to cut to on Thursday. And then we're going to go through every department, every budget. We've got some general fund budgets that we've got to look at, and then we've got some special funds, grant funds, things like that. So we're going to go through there, make sure that we're being fiscally responsible. And the great news is, Tony, I was telling you before we came on that a couple of years ago, we were all very concerned with the inflation, and a lot of people were saying that the sky might be falling and the county was going to be bankrupt in a number of years. And we're probably in as healthy of a situation as we've ever been. We've got an expected $2 million surplus this year, in addition to the healthy reserves that we had coming into the year. And even though the council's been pushing a lot of money towards road funding, and the highway department's done a great job of getting some additional paving on the ground over the last couple of years, we've still got lots of cash on hand. So we're going to try to keep the growth of the budget down just because that's, fiscally responsible. But we don't even need really to cut money this year in order to balance the budget. So.
Well, and let's kind of talk a little bit about that. How does that process work, Jesse? For folks who may be unfamiliar, because obviously social media always seems to be prevalent when it comes to people trying to understand how our county government works. Yep. Let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, the council itself, you guys really sit down and you go through this budget with a fine-tooth comb.
Right.
Is there a expectation or a wish that you guys come up with to where you feel the budget needs to be?
Yeah, so just to give you a little process background on that, we've got elected department heads, and then we've got department heads that are appointed and hired by the commissioners. They all craft their budgets based on the work that they think that they need to do next year, and then it's the council's responsibility to set the priorities for what items get funded, what items might need to be even funded more or might need to be funded less. But the department heads submit their budgets. It was a couple of months ago now. They sent those over to us. We go through first reading, which happened last month, and we basically just acknowledge the submissions and put those in for the record. Then we advertise those so that the public gets an opportunity to see them. And then the council members usually break down into groups of 2 or 3 so that we don't have a quorum present, and just kind of go through line by line, compare the budgets that were submitted to what was turned in last year. And then usually if something seems like it might be a little out of line, a request is significantly higher than what we've seen in the past, we'll contact those department heads, ask them, what the purpose was for that additional request. And I will say the department heads have been really good this year of making sure that there are notes in there and that there's background material when there's larger than usual requests. So we've gotten a lot of good information to go through on that. Then we're going to look at some of the items that are really going to impact the budget, like what size of raises are we going to give for county employees going into next year. We also set sort of like an overall growth target. I know Councilman Harmon and I have been talking for a number of years about wanting to mirror what they do in Indianapolis, which is they've targeted a 3% growth rate for state government. We think a 3% growth rate for county government is good as well. And so even though revenues are outpacing that 3% growth, we're going to try to hold the overall growth of the budget to 3%. So I think we're going to have a recommendation of a 3%, maybe a little bit more of an increase for wages. That's the biggest part of the budget is the wages, and so I think we've sort of set up this practice of we're going back and forth from one year to another. Last year we gave a percentage increase, and this year we're going to give a flat increase so that you don't get out of whack as you go down the line. If you're given a percentage increase, your highest paid people tend to go up and pull away from your lower paid people. And if you just give a flat increase every year, then that gap tends to widen and become insignificant. So we're going to put this practice in place where we go back and forth from one year to another so that you still see a difference in pay between your experienced people and your managers versus your entry-level folks, but where that doesn't get out of whack. So. Right.
And again, that is one of the a pay structure that I don't know. I'm not. I have to admit, I'm not that involved in that. To know that it seems like that would be the fairest way to make sure the administrators, for example, doesn't get the gap is real big.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Talk a little bit about also with these budgets. You mentioned that. You got if one budget is bigger than the other. Mm-hmm. So the course of decision making, how does that come into play with today's economy?
Yeah.
For example, I mean, is that? I guess what I'm asking is the state of the economy a justification for or against, so to speak, when it comes to budgets?
Yeah, so I think the number one thing we have to remember as representatives of the people, we're put in this position to make sure that that we're trying to keep taxes low, we're trying to keep expenses responsible, because obviously the way people spend their own money in their own pockets at home is always going to be better than the way the government spends money. And we've got to make sure that we're funding essential services, but that we're not growing government beyond what's absolutely essential.
It means, yeah.
Right. Because obviously people are hurting out there right now. I pay bills just like everybody else does, and that that paycheck that if you're making the same amount of money today that you were making 4 years ago, you're feeling the difference between what you're actually able to buy, because obviously gas is up and groceries are up, and if you go out to eat, the cost of that steak is going to be significantly more than it was 4 years ago. So I think our number one responsibility is to respect the fact that government's not the most important thing in people's lives, and that we're doing our best to try to keep money in people's pockets. People have seen their property tax assessments go up a lot over the last couple of years, and I will tell people that probably the number one frustration that I've had since I've been in county government is that the way that this tax structure is set up, if we were to cut the county budget down to the bare bones, it still wouldn't result in people seeing more money in their pockets, because the property taxes that they pay are just going to go to some other unit of government based on the way that the state has that formula set up. So I'll say that's one of the things I'm really excited about with this upcoming election is we've got a Republican ticket for state government with Mike Braun, our current U.S. Senator, is running for governor, and Micah Beckwith is his nominee for lieutenant governor. I think they're both great guys, and they are dedicated to property tax reform next year, and so I'm going to be excited to see what they can do at the state level to help us have some better tools to actually put money back in people's pockets based on the decisions that we make here at the local level. So,
well, and here on the local level, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, for as many years I've been on the air talking about the budget and stuff, those who are up there making decisions, that's a tedious job. Mm-hmm. It is a tedious job, to say the least. But I've not heard, and plus I've had the privilege of knowing most of the county councilmen over the years, mm-hmm. And I would trust them.
Yeah,
and this group no different. When we talk about ideologies of how mm-hmm. budgets get ran, you also talk to other representatives from other counties.
Oh yeah, mm-hmm.
and you kind of pick their brain a little bit about how they see their budgets. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be honest with you. I was in this short little conversation with another councilman from a neighboring county, and they complimented how Marshall County's government has done, not just the past but currently, when it comes to keeping where you need to be with the budget.
Yeah.
And not having any gaps anywhere. It's almost like they don't seem to do the due diligence that our people have done over the many years. And I guess to me that's a kudos and a pat on the back for how serious you guys take this particular budget discussions.
Yeah. Well, and I will say a lot of the credit for that goes to we've got obviously great elected department heads. We've got great folks that work under the commissioners as well. Our auditor, Angie Birchmeyer, and her staff, they do a fantastic job of making sure that all the ducks are in a row. We just got out of an audit conference, and the state audits us and every unit of government every 2 years, and our audit came back almost flawless. And with all the transactions that we do throughout the year, to be as dialed in as we are is really impressive. Like I said, we've got a great staff there. But I think the key has been here in Marshall County, even going back years, is to say
Sorry, I got that camera too close to you. Sorry.
There, I was looking for where the camera was. You're right over there.
Sorry.
Okay. But the key has been just an absolute commitment to not raise taxes. And that's what forces you to be responsible, is when, people have been asking us to increase the sales tax, or I'm sorry, the income tax here in this county, and what we've looked at is that there really is a need for some additional funding for public safety here in the county, and while that's not really a statutory duty of the council, we do see that we do have some funds that are available that we can help out with, and so we created a public safety study committee a couple of months ago, and we've been looking at what can we do to try to come alongside our firefighters, our police officers, and our EMTs, and I'm going to be making a presentation to the council on Thursday to look at doing some additional appropriations this year and setting aside some money for next year, somewhere between $400,000 and $600,000. I think the council can afford to help with training and with equipment, to maybe do some 50-50 matches with the townships and the towns and the fire districts, to try to come alongside and help support them, because they do need
in other words, taking the financial some of the financial burden away from our local law enforcement
Right.
and EMTs and the likes.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's killed it about the inflation lately is that look, the cost of a fire truck, the cost of breathing apparatuses and other safety equipment has really gone through the roof. You know, healthcare has been a huge expense, but things like that are even getting more expensive. You know, started back with COVID when those supply chains got interrupted. Just the price of producing things like that went out the roof. So, yeah, like I said, we're not going to raise taxes. Some folks have been afraid about that because we've looked at the options, but I think what we've seen is that there's enough money in our existing funds that we can afford to set aside around that $500,000 mark a year going forward to help out with that. So
how does are you guys allowed to like shift money from department to another department? Are you allowed to do that? Because I don't know. I don't know the rules on how that works. So talk a little bit about that. I mean, do you have that? Are you allowed to have that flexibility to do that?
One of the things I think this council has been very good at the last couple of years is taking that question into account, because there's general fund money which we can use for just about anything, and then there are many dedicated funds that the county gets as well, that might come from special revenue streams, that might come from grants and things like that. Those dedicated funds can only be spent on very specific things.
Yeah.
And so anytime an opportunity comes up for us to use those dedicated funds instead of using general fund money, we've been very intentional about say, for instance, the special tax for the jail. For a long time, we were spending a lot of general fund money to support the jail, while the balance in that special jail tax fund was going up and up and up every year. So we shifted more of the operations costs from the jail onto the jail fund, freed up space in the general fund, and so we've been able to increase those surpluses in the general fund year after year, and then divert that to other things. So we've been spending general fund money for road repair, mostly, but that's being cautious about spending those dedicated funds first has allowed us to free up space in the general fund, and that's given us more flexibility. So, good question.
Let's talk about relationships for a minute. I mean, talk a little bit about your responsibility as a councilman and how your job ties in working with the commissioners and other entities. I think this is important because I don't know, of late it seems we've kind of lost the, how do I want to say this? We've kind of lost that relationship, unfortunately. But, I mean, it is what it is. And so for clarification purpose, let's talk a little bit about that relationship and how the county as a unit works all together, from commissioners working with the council and everybody else who's involved here. Yeah.
So, like I said before, you've got a lot of elected officials in county government, obviously. You've got elected department heads like the clerk and the auditor and the treasurer, the surveyor. I think the council's had a very good relationship with all of those folks for the 3.5 years that I've been on the council. Very professional people, and we've worked really well together. The relationship between the commissioners and the council has not been so smooth for the last 3.5 years. And, obviously we've had some elections since then. And I think we've got a great opportunity going into 2025. We're obviously going to have 2 brand new commissioners. Regardless of how the election turns out, we're going to have 2 new folks on that board next year, and then we're going to have at least 1 new member, and actually we'll have at least 2 new members on the council, because if Adam Falstich wins the commissioner's race, his seat's going to open up and we'll caucus somebody in. But I think we've got a lot of collegiality right now in the Republican Party. Our 2 nominees for commissioner, which would be me and Adam Falstich, and then Tim Harmon and Jim Masterson, I have a good feeling are going to be coming back to join us again next year. And Brandon Shaddix, the Republican nominee for that 3rd seat on the council. I just feel like we've got a great relationship between all of those folks that are going to remain on the council, and then the new folks that I think have got a great chance to get elected to the commissioners board next year. I just think it's a great opportunity, and we'll probably have a better working relationship between those two bodies than we've had in my memory.
So when we talk about new faces coming in and the likes, it's obviously important to make sure everybody's on the same page as a council, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat that gets chosen. I think if it's looked at and dealt with anything differently, you're going to eventually lose your connection with your constituents, and two, what example are you setting?
Yeah.
Is it going to be a situation where we're going to continually have constant bickering because you're a D or you're an R, or if you're an R and an R?
Yeah.
And that's got to get taken care of first and foremost.
Yeah.
Without question.
Well,
I'm not in your meetings. I don't know. I don't know what you do. I don't know how when or not you're allowed to contact each other without being considered a meeting. Listen, I'm not into that. What I'm into is relationships, because when everybody's on the same page, understanding what we're trying to accomplish as a council and as commissioners, it's going to do nothing but benefit this county and the people who you serve, and which, by the way, I'm one of them.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing, is that there's been too much off and on bickering, and social media doesn't help it at all. And I want to be able to have these interviews on my radio station that tell me what's going on, what decisions are being made, and why they're being made.
Yep.
There has to be a trust that gets developed somewhere along the line.
Yep.
And again, I don't care who's in, D or an R. I don't care. It's about how are you going to help me with my taxes? How are we going to get our roads taken care of? How are we going to fix some issues if we have, and I notice I'm saying if. I'm if in everything. If there's issues with the jail, or if there's issues with somebody's property, solar. Listen. Sooner or later, we've got to come to a decision on that, on what's going to take place, benefiting the county in some way.
Yep.
And honestly, we talk about the solar issue, and I know this is something that you've kind of ran on. I don't know one way or the other what's right or what's wrong with this. What I've always hung my hat on with this is, how is it going to benefit everybody in the county?
Right.
What's the benefit of it? And because again, I don't care if who's getting it. I care about whether or not there's at least I hope an opportunity for their property rights to be accounted for, at least in this discussion. But at the same time, understanding that if it's going to be a detriment to neighbors or the county itself.
Yeah.
Here's what I don't like. I don't like companies coming in and promising everything, and then as soon as they get the dollars, you see the taillights, and that's it. That's happened too many times. We're not the only county that's gone through this. Believe me. Just ask to our neighbors to the north. I don't want the taillight guarantees. I want the assurance that we're going to get some kind of help somewhere along the lines. And if this is a job creator, then what are we talking about here, and for how long?
Right.
So that I don't give a crap if it's a Democrat or a Republican property owner. I can care less about that.
Yeah.
We just need to make sure that it's got to benefit everybody, including the property owner too.
Yeah.
Now, where's the magic? What's the magical answer to this? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I will tell you, Tony, this is one of the things that really frustrates me about being in local government, is that there are people who make decisions at other levels of government that then drop it in our lap. And I can tell you that if it wasn't for the massive federal subsidies that have been placed on renewable energy, we wouldn't be having this conversation, because as it stands on its own, industrial solar is not economically sustainable. If it wasn't for the federal subsidies, which if you look at that down the road, what those things translate into is additional trillions of dollars of debt. They're printing money, and they're going to be forcing this debt onto hopefully my kids someday. We wouldn't even be having this conversation if it wasn't for that. And so I stand, and the Republicans here in Marshall County stand with President Trump, and he understands that the Green New Deal is not a good deal for the future of America. So that's the big picture. The small picture is, are we putting the protections in place to make sure that if one of these companies goes out of business, are the taxpayers in Marshall County going to be stuck with millions of dollars in cleanup to remove, thousands of acres of abandoned solar panels from these fields? And so those are the two things that I'm number one concerned about. There's a lot of other things that people will debate. Are these things safe or are they toxic? Is this a good deal for taxpayers? If it works out, it might be. But right now it looks like there's too many risks there for me. It also concerns me that this process was very rushed. And so we're going to see what happens in the next, 2.5-3 months between now and January 1st if these things get pushed in, if permits get issued, if, folks break ground and start running with these projects. We're going to do what we can to slow that down and to curtail it in January if we get elected. But right now there's a lot that's up in the air. There's been one permit that's been requested so far that I'm aware of. But like I said, what happens between now and January 1st, we're going to need some folks to continue to make their opinions heard about this if this goes to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And then, like I said, we're going to do what we can to stop it from going any faster than that. But,
and let's talk about that relationship with the Board of Zoning Appeals. As a councilman, what's responsibility there? So
it's very interesting because the BZA, a lot of folks don't know about the existence of some of these boards. We've got a planning commission that sets the rules. We've got a county comprehensive plan which casts the vision. Our county comprehensive plan says that we should focus on preserving the rural nature of Marshall County, that we don't want to be a Carmel or a Zionsville or whatever, that we're very comfortable with being rural Marshall County. And I think that conflicts with having all these solar panels here in the county. But the comprehensive plan sets the vision, the board of or the planning commission writes the rules, and then the Board of Zoning Appeals makes individual decisions about does a permit get issued, do we have a variance that gets offered to somebody so that they can deviate from those rules just a little bit. And I think it's a very good thing that our zoning ordinance for solar requires these folks to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and to get a variance in order to get their permit issued, because it's agricultural land, and so to do an industrial application on agricultural land, you need to get that variance. And so there's going to be a handful of individuals who are going to make that decision if it gets to that point.
So when that decision is made, where does it affect the council?
It really doesn't have a lot to do with us, other than that we appoint one member of that board.
Okay.
But they're going to have a lot of power to decide whether or not this goes forward or not. And it's going to come down to those 5 men and women on the Board of Zoning Appeals. And so, we've had hundreds and hundreds of people that have shown up at the Planning Commission, and I'm hoping that if it gets to that point, folks will come out and let themselves be heard at the BZA as well. So.
Oh man, I'm already done with you. Jeez, I kind of figured this is how it was going to work.
Yeah.
Any last minute thing you want to throw together here?
I'll just say that I really appreciate the trust that the people of Marshall County have placed in me. It has been my honor to serve for the last 3.5 years on the council and to be president for the last 1.5 years. We've got a great group of people that it has just been my privilege to serve with. They work hard and they love the people of Marshall County. I'm hoping that I get an opportunity to serve for another 4 years, because right now it's go to the Board of Commissioners or go home. So
There you go. Jesse Bohannon, our councilman and president of the council, and thank you for giving me some time. I know you got to get out of here.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time, and don't be a stranger. I mean,
right.
The door is open for everybody. So
thank you very much,
and appreciate you coming in.
And always love what you do with high school sports, and go Lions.
There you go. We'll have them on the air Friday night when they take on LaVille. So that'll be here on Max 98.3. Back to wrap it up in a moment.